Hello and welcome to another Smaulgld live stream. Today is the 5th of November. It is Monday, 2018. That is Guy Fawkes Day for those of you in the United Kingdom, if you know what I mean. Alright, now let us talk about what we're going to talk about. What are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about Chinese silver stackers versus American stackers. American silver stackers versus Chinese silver stackers is the topic of the evening. There's some significant differences. They may shock you to your core when you find out these differences between Chinese silver stackers and American silver stackers. Carl Joseph DeMarco leading off the comments there with remember the 5th of November. Okay, but first, before we get into the topic of the evening, let us take a look at what happened during the day. So, we had gold. It was essentially a flat day. It was a non-eventful day. Closed at 1230.99, almost 1231. It was down about 0.25%. No big deal. Stock market was up, but the NASDAQ was down. I think that's basically Apple bringing that down. But the Dow Jones was at 25,461, up almost 200 points. That's up 0.76%. So the stock market went up 0.76%. The gold went down 0.23%. So you can figure your Dow gold ratio is hitting higher. NASDAQ down 0.38% at 73.28. S&P 500 at 27.38. That was up about 15 points or about 0.5%. So you can see not much movement in your gold price. Let's take a look over at silver. Not much of a day there either, although went down a lot more than gold. 3 times a greater percentage decrease, down 0.73%, and it closed at 14.63. Now what does that do to your gold silver ratio? Well, heads higher. Excuse me, heads higher. Gold silver ratio closed the day at 84.15. Now, maybe what we're talking about today, Chinese silver stackers versus American silver stackers, may start to put this ratio in perspective. I think a lot of you have heard from the silver pumper channels so much cherry-picked data on silver that you are convinced, because you've heard it, and you've heard it repeated, and you've probably repeated it yourself. Silver is so useful. Silver is rarer than gold. All these stories about silver is the most useful element in the world. We could not live our lives without silver. And of course, you can't live your lives without copper and tin and zinc and so on. But you've convinced yourself the gold-silver ratio is unsustainable at 80:1. It must come down to its natural ratio of 16:1. And on and on and on. And you repeat that stuff, it gets in your head, and you get convinced that silver is, there's something wrong. The world doesn't understand your view of silver and the silver pumper's view of silver. And I've gone through this many times, that why the gold-silver ratio is where it's been. I don't have time to go through it all tonight. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to cherry pick a significant piece of data, a couple of pieces of data that might further justify why the ratio is where it is. Before we do that, let's just take a look at a few of our other charts that we like to check in from time to time on. One of them is the Brinks Silver COMEX Vault, and we can see that there, and they've slipped below 50 million ounces, but they're still got a lot of silver in that Brinks depository there. 49.275 million ounces. That's more than a record year's worth of American Silver Eagles. A lot of silver. JP Morgan. Now check this out. JP Morgan's silver in the COMEX approved COMEX vault is 150.9 million ounces. That is now a record. Remember, this is not necessarily JP Morgan silver. It could be held on behalf of clients, just like that Brinks hoard that you see being increased over at the Brinks. All right, so those are your charts. We like to check in on those from time to time. And what else have we got in the way of charts before we get to our topic? I think I'm going to save all these charts as part of our topic. So why don't we get into the main part of our show tonight, which is Chinese silver stackers versus American silver stackers. Uh-oh, we got a moron here.
Presenting the distinguished international news commentator and foreign correspondent,
Smaulgld. This has been an extraordinary week in world affairs.
No, I told Hillary Clinton that that's moronic.
All right, well, let's take a look now at our topic. Chinese silver stackers versus American silver stackers. Now, one of the things that we've seen is, let's take a look at the history of the U.S. Mint from 1986 through 2017. And when the Mint first came out with the American Silver Eagle and the American Gold Eagle, the gold coin was the star of the show. Why? Because Americans had not been allowed to own gold from 1933 through 1974. And from 1974 to 1986, there were no gold coins minted by the United States Mint. So basically, if you wanted gold as an American after 1974, when you were allowed to buy, you had to buy Krugerrands. There was no U.S. Mint gold coin. In fact, there was no U.S. Mint silver coin either, since 1964, they made the 90% U.S. minted dimes, quarters, and half dollars. But they did mint in 1982 a George Washington commemorative silver coin. That was the most recent silver coin the U.S. Mint made. But you can see, in 1986, they sold only 4 times the number of silver coins that they sold of gold coins. They sold a lot of gold coins that first year, I think 1.1 million. I don't have the numbers here. I kind of have them off the top of my head. And they sold about 4, 5, 6 million ounces of the American Silver Eagles. It was a 4-to-1 ratio. And you can see from 1986 to 2000 that essentially they were selling not much more silver than they were gold. 6-to-1, 3-to-1, 6-to-1, 20-to-1, 4-to-1. And remember, silver's a lot cheaper, so the fact that they weren't selling that much more silver than gold was telling that gold was the star of the show, and that is what the people wanted. Okay. Now, you see in 2000, all of a sudden, there's a 97-to-1 ratio between gold and silver. You know, what's that all about? Well, look at the time before that, 97, 98, 99. In 1998, 99, Americans and people around the world were concerned about the year 2000. Y2K was coming, and they were prepping. They thought that if there was an issue, that the computer systems would not roll over and not be able to read 1999 to 0000, that maybe the grids would go down and there would be no water, there'd be no food, supply systems would break down, airplanes would crash, and so on. And there was a real chance of that happening, although by the middle of the year, it seemed like they had put enough resources on it and they were really working overtime to make sure all the systems worked, and the systems did work. Well, in the year 2000, there was less of a need then to protect yourself from the Y2K calamity that was a potential. And so they didn't sell much at all in 2000. That's why the ratio was 97-to-1. And then in the United States, you can see that from 2000 to 2008 started to creep up. They started selling more silver than they did gold by a much bigger amount. And that's essentially because gold and silver were both out of favor. And from 2000 to 2007, from the retail perspective, although gold was creeping up very nicely from 2000 to 2007, really big run in the gold price. But but there was also a big stock market run, so there wasn't a big rush to gold on the retail side. Now, in 2008 and 9, that changed in a big way. When the financial crisis hit in 2008, the end of the year, there was a massive demand for gold. In fact, they ran out and they had trouble. They had to stop making the American gold buffalo at the U.S. Mint, and lots of gold was sold. Now you can see the ratio was low during 2008 and 9. Well, that's because most of the dollars for sure went into gold. That was the go-to metal in this big crisis. As the crisis went on, or somewhat ended, and the Fed moved into its post-crisis money printing, Fed going to zero interest rates, QE kicking off, that's when people started to pay attention to silver. And you can see silver was not the big draw in 2008, 9, and 10. It started to become a big draw as the gold price moved up in 2009 and 2010. And then you had the classic silver catch-up. And silver finally did catch up with gold and passed it in terms of gain. In 2011, it hit a peak of $50. Gold hit a peak of $1,900. But still, gold was the metal at the high point there. When the silver price fell from its peak, a lot of people thought, well, this is a bargain now. The silver price has gone from 50 to 43 to 40 to 35 to 30. The bottom is in here. And we had a lot of, in the United States, there's clearly some, I'm not going to name them, some very significant silver channels that promoted silver as the big bargain. And the ratio again was high. It was 50 to 1, 60 to 1, and it should be. And that's when you started hearing all this stuff that silver is rarer than gold and all those stories. And that really, really drove the silver demand retail at the U.S. Mint. And you can see in 2014, the U.S. Mint sold 106 times more ounces of silver than gold. And that's pretty much held. I mean, the retail gold sales have not picked up that much. And even as the silver sales have declined, so have the gold sales. So it was only 2016 where it went back down to 46 to 1. So in the United States, especially since the financial crisis, you really can't tell from ratios, but the U.S. Mint is when they sold 42, 44, 47, 37, generally in the 40 million of American 1 ounce silver eagles. They'd never done that before. During the period of 86 to 2000, they were always selling under 10 million. They weren't selling 40 million. But silver became a very American thing to do, is to buy silver. Silver is rarer than gold. It should be a 1-to-1 price ratio. Silver ratio 16 to 1 is the natural ratio, and it actually should go to 1-to-1. All those stories, it's a YouTube phenomenon that is not true in the rest of the world. Now, we've had people on from India, Mexico. They do not talk about silver in the same way, that it's the greatest bargain on earth. Can't live your life without silver. We've had a Mexican national on saying that when an old silver ring wears out, they just throw it out. It's not revered in the same way that gold is. Clearly, we've had an Indian national on, said the same thing. We had a guy on from, I think it was from Bulgaria, and he mentioned that silver wasn't even considered when they had hyperinflation and a crisis there. Now, I'm not denigrating silver. What I'm highlighting is that silver has become revered in America on YouTube channels. It's not considered the same. Oh, but silver, the word for money in silver in French is argent. And yeah, okay. You get very excited about silver because you hear these stories. Now, I like silver, but I'm just saying that it is not held in the same esteem. And you're going to see in a minute, it's not purchased in the same quantities as gold is, or in the same dollar amounts. Now, a lot of silver demand, when I show you the Indian demand, a lot of that's industrial. And so a lot of people think that globally people are stacking silver. They're not. And I'm going to show you a few more charts here. Now here's something that doesn't tell you anything. It's, in a sense, cherry-picked data. But let me show you the Swiss are refiners of gold and silver. But this chart shows clearly, and there is a narrative here that is true, that a lot of gold gets refined in Switzerland and then shipped out to China. And this is just a given month. And again, you need to see more data than this. But this is illustrative. It's a fact. And look at it. It goes to Hong Kong. It goes to China, the two biggest places. It goes to India. I mean, there's nothing there that's surprising. Swiss gold exports, they don't mine it in Switzerland. That gold comes from all over the world and ends up in Swiss refineries and then gets cast into the type of bars that the country wants and then shipped out. And look at that. Hong Kong, India, China. Makes total sense. Look, Thailand. That's the whole gold moving west to east. So there's a clear case of that. Now you would think that the world would have the same thing going on for silver. Well, it doesn't. I mean, look where the silver goes. It goes to the United Kingdom. China's not even on this list. Now, China, you would say, well, but China has its own silver mining industry. Yeah, it does. It also has the #1 gold mining industry in the world. And yet they still import massive amounts of gold. Now, Switzerland exports, and that's the only place you can get silver from. But the point is, there's no refining being done in Switzerland in any significant amount and being sent to Hong Kong and to China. Now, there is, you can see India's on there, but the United Kingdom's a big one. You can see India, Turkey, lots of Turkish demand for silver, France, Germany, and so on. Okay, that doesn't really tell you anything. See, these charts in isolation, they are cherry-picked, and they may even be cherry-picked from the wrong orchard, and we may be comparing apples from one cherry-picked orchard to oranges in another cherry-picked orchards. But I just show you this. I don't draw any conclusions from this other than it's somewhat directionally true that gold does move from Switzerland to the west. Let's get a little more specific now. We've seen the silver to gold ratio in the U.S. We see it's very high at the U.S. Mint. We see that a lot of, most of that demand is American for those silver eagles. I don't believe that J.P. Morgan bought any of them. That's a different story. That's American retail demand as per discussions with major bullion dealers looking at SEC filings of A-Mark. That was silver that was sold not to J.P. Morgan. But in any event, silver is sold a lot to Americans. And here is an intro. These are some numbers here I put together quickly before the show. Now, what this chart is showing you, U.S. Mint silver to gold sales. Now remember, what the U.S. Mint sells is not all the silver and gold that's sold in the United States, but it is illustrative as for retail demand. So there's other gold sold in the U.S. and other forms of other silver, but this is, in a sense, the stacking demand for gold and silver. So just last year, the U.S. Mint sold 18 million 1-ounce American Silver Eagles, and they sold 228,000 ounces of 1-ounce American Gold Eagles. Now, I know there's fractional size ounces and there's American Gold Buffaloes, but I like to keep it constant with this. It's not that much more. It ends up to be like 310,000 or something. It's more, but it's not significantly more when you add in the fractionals and the American Gold Buffaloes. But in any event, here's an interesting thing. That's a 79-to-1 ratio, and we already saw that on the red chart. But here's something. The value of that gold sold in 2017 wasn't much more than the silver sold. And that leads you to the 1-to-1 ratio. Oh, you see the amount of investable money that's moving into gold. It's just the amount that's moving into silver, but silver is only 8 times as rare. And this is going to mean that silver is set to skyrocket, that the gold-silver ratio is out of whack. That's the cherry-picked data, and that follows a cherry-picked narrative. You see how it's going on here? Oh, look, as if this is the only gold and silver sold in the world. People are buying gold in the same dollar amounts as they're buying silver. You see, that's going to lead to a shortage, because if they're doing that, there's only 7 times as much silver, or 8 times as much, or 9 times, whatever the number they come up with, but they're spending as much on gold as they are for silver. That can't last, you see. And now it's all silver to the moon. Gold-silver ratio is out of whack. It's going to 9-to-1. Or maybe it'll go to 1-to-1. Okay. And then you can see the same concept in 2016, less pronounced. 2016 was a good year for gold sales, but still, 817,000 ounces sold of gold, 37 million ounces sold of silver. It's still a 46-to-1 ratio. But if you look at the valuation, that's just $1 billion worth of gold and still a $500 million worth of silver. So that leads some people to say, you see, people are spending as much money on silver, almost as much on silver as they are on gold, but yet there's not that much silver and so on. Okay. But this is tiny. What I'm going to show you now will probably crush your views. Now, a lot of you people probably think that you hear all the time that China is buying gold hand over fist. They know what is coming. They are going to crush the dollar because China has gold and they are smart. Have you ever read Sun Tzu, The Art of War? Okay. You hear all that all the time. China is smart because they like gold. China is buying gold hand over fist. China is going to crush the dollar. Gold, back yuan, game changer. And on and on. And a lot of people, although it's not said, in their minds they think, well, if they're stacking gold, they're also stacking silver. And that Chinese demand for silver must be in line with their voracious appetite for gold. Wrongo star. And I'm going to show you something. And you're not going to like it if you're a silver pumper. But China's investment demand for silver, hardly anything at all. Now, I'm bringing you these numbers before I show them to you. They come from the Silver Institute, who have pretty good numbers. Now, they could be wrong, but they have a methodology, and they show a lot of silver demand for solar, and they show a lot of silver demand for other industrial applications. But what they show for pure stacking, meaning coins, rounds, and then bars, it's not very good. Now, check this out. All right, what you're seeing now is how many gold ounces that they sell. The gold numbers are from the World Gold Council. They show how many tons are sold in the form of investment demand gold in China. And then I have the Silver Institute amounts sold for silver. Well, this is eye-opening because last year, in China, they sold pretty much the same number of ounces for investment purposes in gold as they did for silver. Now, if you let that sink in, that's about 8, with the current gold-silver price ratio, that means Chinese people who are investing spend 85 times more yuan, or money, whatever you want to call it, on gold than they do silver. In 2017, according to the Silver Institute, they bought just 10 million ounces worth of investment silver. Now that's very low because remember, the population of China is probably 4 times the size of the United States. And even with the dismal numbers that the United States had last year, they still sold 18 million ounces just of American silver eagles. Plus, in America, you've got all the privately minted silver rounds, from Sunshine Minting to whatever Chris Duane's company is called. What are they called? The ones that I'm sure he does limited mintages, so there's not that much. But the point is, it's not just his. There's Sunshine Minting. There's all the private minted rounds, silver rounds. So in addition to the 18 million silver eagles sold last year, there's probably another 15, 20 million privately minted rounds. So the point being that the United States is buying more silver. And that's my point, is there's a big demand for silver that's been ginned up, I believe, in the last 10 years on the internet, with a lot of the silver channels pushing silver as the next coming and the one item, the go-to metal. But that's not how it's viewed around the world, as we've mentioned. And you can see when they when they buy as many ounces of gold as they do silver in China, what does that mean? Well, in dollar terms, it means Chinese people spent $1.21 billion on gold. They only spent $147 million on silver. Now, 2016 was a little different. They bought about 9.4 3 million ounces to 14 million ounces of silver. And again, the difference was tremendous. Now, I think in 2015, they bought like 12 million ounces of gold. Unbelievable amounts. But here's what the Silver Institute had to say about Chinese silver. Now, this is what I say all the time, but this isn't me talking here. They were talking about how, and I'll read this to you. This is from the Silver Institute, and I will give you, this is a great report. You should check them out. Support the Silver Institute there. I'm on page 19. And they're talking about the decline in the sales of silver. Now, from 2010 to 2018, it wasn't like 2017 was like the worst year ever with 10 million. 2010, it looks like they only sold 11 million ounces. At the peak in 2012, for silver, physical silver investment was only 25 million ounces. And it says silver investment has suffered from the disappointing price performance in recent years. Now remember, that disappointing price performance in recent years led to record silver sales in America. So they're saying, Silver Institute, this is just their analysis or their observation, that Chinese didn't buy because the price has been underperforming. Well, usually you would think Chinese are smart, right? They read Sun Tzu. They would buy when the price was low. I tend to believe that the next part, which Silver Institute said, is true. It says, this is mainly due to the emergence of diversifying or safe haven purchases of gold in recent years by high net worth individuals looking to protect their wealth from the local currency depreciation and the uncertain outlook for other asset classes in China. But here's the key sentence from Silver Institute. As silver is not perceived to have the same quasi-monetary and safe haven attributes as gold, the metal has not enjoyed similar inflows. Now remember, we've discussed this. I've said that gold still has that quasi-monetary, I didn't use these terms, the quasi-monetary attributes because it is held as a reserve asset. You know, we had this discussion with gold is money, period. Silver is money, period. And I argue that neither of them are money, but that the connection to silver as a functioning currency has long been broken, whereas gold has not. Now, the Chinese apparently believe the same thing when they spend 85 times the amount of yuan on gold than they do on silver, buying physically the same amount of gold as they do of silver. And then the Silver Institute thinks that maybe this is the end of the downtrend that began 4 years ago. But 4 years ago, the top at the peak of 2012 was when they sold only 25 million investment ounces of silver, which is less than the United States. So, point being is that the United States silver stacking market is much more robust, although it has died off in the last 2 years. But it was very strong from 2011 to 2015. Record amounts of American Silver Eagles, record amounts probably of other silver, privately minted silver rounds and bars, record amounts of Canadian Maple Leafs. But clearly, that silver mania never hit China in the same way it hit the United States. Maybe because they banned YouTube in China. I also have to know, I apologize, I didn't have time to make charts of this stuff, but I also looked up... I have older charts on. I have looked up Europe. Same thing. If you look at the Austrian mint, which is the big mint in the United Kingdom, in Europe. First of all, putting aside whether people would rather have gold or silver in Europe, silver has a VAT on it and gold doesn't. So even if you wanted silver, it's gonna put a damper on your willingness or desire to buy silver. But in 2017, remember, we see numbers in America, 70 to 1, 80 to 1 buying, and then in China, it's like 1 to 1 gold to silver. And in America, U.S. Silver Eagles, they can sell 80 times, 100 times more Silver Eagles than Gold Eagles, and in China, 1 to 1. Well, in Europe, it's about 5, 6, 7 to 1. So they don't sell that much more silver than they do gold. So the Austrian mint sold just 2 million ounces of those Austrian Philharmonic coins in 2017 were $30 million. That's a spit in the bucket. But they spent $437 million on gold coins, and they only sold 5.8 times more silver coins than they did gold. And in 2016, they only sold 3.4 million Austrian silver philharmonics, and they sold nearly 500,000 gold 1 ounce philharmonics, and that ratio is about 7.5 to 1. So you can see in Europe, in China, they don't have the same relative clamoring for gold, for silver, as they do for gold. Gold is clearly internationally the go-to metal for people who are concerned about long-term wealth preservation. Not that silver can't perform that function, but it is not perceived, and the numbers bear it out. It does not have the same staying power as gold does historically, and it's just not front of mind in a lot of people when they think about what you should buy. Like, and even in the United States, when we had the Y2K, it was gold, wasn't silver. I think silver in the United States has benefited from a massive campaign on YouTube and a lot of the channels. You can just think through all the ones where you probably have listened to. There's so many silver channels out there focusing on silver, even if they also focus on gold. I think Peter Schiff is probably the only company that probably promotes gold more than silver. I think most of the other channels, they promote, they have silver in their name. They promote silver a lot more than gold. And as a result, because of that marketing, and all those stats that they tell you, silver is rarer than gold. JP Morgan is buying silver. All these stories, see, they're all, the only people in America believe this stuff. Not that silver isn't valuable, and it is a good find, and a lot of the data that they give you is good, but a lot of it's cherry-picked, and they don't give you the other side, the global side, the sales side around the world. And here you're looking at it right here. China to silver, gold sales ratios. Looks like the average person in China, the average person with a lot of money, the average person worried about currency devaluations gets themselves some gold in investment form at a far greater rate than they might get it in the silver. All right, I think that's all the charts I have. Let's see if there's any other charts. No, that's all I got to show you tonight. So let's take a look at our comments and see what we got. All right. Carl Joseph DeMarco. Now, Carl Joseph DeMarco spent time in China. He's actually written a book about that. Crypto Shrugged author. There's 2 authors are here. Crypto Shrugged author. He's also written a book. We got 2 authors right off the bat. Feel free to call if you want any on-the-ground insights, Carl. That's right. Well, Roger Henley. If only the Chinese bought as much silver as they did fortune cookies. Yeah, well, it doesn't look like they buy much silver. Not that China doesn't have a lot of demand for silver, because as I mentioned, they eat up most of the solar demand for silver. They're very big on silver. They're not that big on jewelry either, for silver jewelry. They tend to prefer the gold jewelry. They're not big on silverware. India is much bigger on silverware and silver jewelry, and they have gift givings where they include silver in India. They don't in China. China is all about industrial applications, about alloys and soldering, and really it's about solar, and also they make semiconductors and they make electronics, so they do have that demand. The demand is not primarily from people stacking silver and watching YouTubes telling them that silver is the most important thing that they can own in their life, and the gold silver ratio is unsustainable, and there's going to be a silver shortage, and there's some pyramid why you have to buy silver. All right, let's see. So Westerners who thought Chinese there you go. It's just Westerners who think Chinese actually eat fortune cookies, right? And that they walk around all day looking for the gold store with a copy of Sun Tzu tucked under their arm there. No, I think they're more likely getting their social credit scores updated as they walk through their cities on a daily basis. Dr. Modesto Esquire, I haven't seen you in a while. Good to see you back. What's your sense of the tariffs with the Chinese? Will ZX cave? I can't see that happening. He'll cave when social unrest gets out of hand, says Carl Joseph DeMarco. That's the other thing. A lot of people have this mindset, I guess, because the Sun Tzu, China can just wait it out. They could just produce this stuff and just make it, and they can use it themselves, and the United States is in a lot of trouble. Not going to get into that discussion today. But again, that is a narrative that the gold pumpers push because they have it in their heads that China good, U.S. bad, China to crush the dollar, and when China crushes the dollar, then China will reset the price of gold to $700,000 and we'll all be rich. And that's the story. China has had it. The BRICS are going to crush the dollar. Gold, back yuan, game changer. The yuan is getting crushed. I don't even know how these people with a straight face still keep promoting this China narrative. Oh, well, you'll see they've got more gold and the United States doesn't have any gold at Fort Knox. And when everyone finds this out, it's game over. They're going to roll their gold out into a stadium. Yeah, that's what's on China's mind. Rolling gold out into a stadium and saying, show us yours, and then it's game over. Unbelievable. All right, just to everybody know, says Carl Joseph DeMarco, just about everyone I know, expat in China is trying to get out while they still can. Why? They like gold there, Carl. They are smart, unlike us here in the West, who are dumb because we don't like gold. And somehow, they call the dollar toilet paper. What do you think the yuan is? No one wants that. That can be devalued at a minute's notice and has been very, very often. Nick Schulten, again, I must refer to the book, The Bitcoin Standard. Silver is not a store of value. Actually, if you look at it over time, it really hasn't been. It barely hangs on. I've gone through these numbers on a couple of videos. Gold has held its value over time. When we saw this the other night, even more recently, I went through gold versus major world currencies. In some currencies, it's been up every year for like 30 years. Not silver has some down years even against some crappy currencies. Silver is because it's more of an industrial metal than it is a monetary metal. And when it was a monetary metal, it was pocket change. It was never meant to be stored. It was meant to be spent. And governments would print it up and hand it out to you so you can spend it. You didn't buy silver. Having said that, that doesn't mean that there's no value in silver, but this idea that silver is somehow going to go skyrocketing because it's used in yoga pants, and they are finding more uses for it every day. Yeah, nanoparticles of it. Not tons and tons that are required. Oh, but what about electric car? Yeah, okay. You have to know how much of it is being required. But solar demand is going to, yes, but they use less and less silver in solar panels as they go forward. Dr. Modesto Esquire asks Carl Joseph DeMarco that'll solve the invasive Asian carp problem in the Mississippi watershed. I didn't know there was that problem. Someone must have put the carp in the water there and they've gone nuts. Silver Bullet, Silver Shield. That's the name of those. Yes, but I doubt that they take up a significant chunk of U.S. silver demand because they're limited mintage. So by definition, those are more collectors' items than bullion that are bought in mass. But there are a lot of privately minted silver products that are not limited mintage. And in the United States, they sell a lot of silver. Even the last 2 years when it's gone down. But you can see that the rest of the world doesn't buy silver coins in the same amount. Chinese don't like silver, period. Can't even buy silver pandas there, says Carl Joseph DeMarco. Silver Wolverine is here. He says red wave. MAGA. He's all watching the Trump campaign. And then he puts in a political, what do you call it? A pitch. Vote Republican tomorrow. Everyone get out to vote. All right. Dr. Modesto Esquire says the silver Wolverine, red wave will mean massive deficit spending and inflation good for silver. Interesting point. You would think that wouldn't be the case. You would think, well, you know, the Democrats are going to get in. They're going to want to spend a lot of money. No, what they're going to want to do is stop whatever Trump wants to do, and Trump wants to spend a lot of money. So they probably won't even pass a infrastructure bill, which would definitely be inflationary. So who knows what's going to happen? Carl Joseph DeMarco says, we need product placement of silver in Chinese movies. Yes, like the beers did with diamonds. Lots of luxury silver goods in romantic films. That could work. And Carl Joseph DeMarco says, no political party is your savior. That's how we got Nazism and communism. Vote for the best candidate, whoever they are. There is a little difference here, Carl Joseph DeMarco, about candidates. And here's an interesting observation. This isn't mine, but I heard this. The way the Republicans, led by Trump, have run their campaign this year is less based on individuals, but making the congressional races less about, because they don't have the money, apparently, to go through district by district and support candidates there and give them platforms. They've basically said that the Democrats vote in a block led by, quote, crying Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi. And so what they've done is they've portrayed all of the Democrats as being beholden to the Democrat leadership. And that's why you're seeing some Democrat candidates in red states like Claire McCaskill, Tester in Montana, McCaskill in Missouri, Manchin in West Virginia, trying to say, look, I'm a separate candidate and I agree with Trump on certain things, but what they're saying is, no, you don't. You're going to go along with whatever Nancy Pelosi, or in their case, since they're senators, what, quote, crying Chuck Schumer says. So that's an interesting dynamic. They've managed, I believe, if the Republicans win the Senate, it will clearly be because they managed to wrest red state Democratic senators out by removing them from having any individual points of view and tying them like a stone to the Democratic leadership. And even Claire McCaskill came out and said, I'm not like those crazy Democrats. Interesting. All right. I don't vote, you get screwed either way. What's that, says Roger Henley. That's that famous song by Simon and Garfunkel. I think it's Mrs. Robinson. It says, laugh about it, shout about it. Either way, you got to choose. Either way you look at it, going through the candidates to date, laugh about it, shout about it. Either way you look at it, you lose. Yeah. All right. Carl Joseph DeMarco, you got to shovel your own horse in life. Can't wait for liberal conservative to do it, says Dr. Modesto. Actually, what I've realized is I don't expect any of the political parties or candidates to do anything really for me. I generally vote defensively. I vote for the candidates, and this is kind of a Lysander Spooner concept. He takes the view that if you don't have a choice, it's not like things are going to happen no matter what. You vote for the candidate that's least likely to harm you. So when people, a lot of anarchists or libertarians, they take the view that voting is an act of aggression. They don't want to participate in it. Yeah, okay. Philosophically, maybe that's true. But if there's a candidate that says that their goal is, if you elect them, is to draft your children and take your money and make people live in your house that you don't want to live there, and there's another guy who says, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to let you keep half your money, and you may disagree with even the other guy, but defensively, you're going to vote for the person who isn't going to take your kid away from you or going to take your property away from you. So that's just that's not a very idealistic way of looking at it, but it is in a sense defensive voting, where you're not necessarily voting because you hope that they're going to do anything to enhance your life. You're voting on the hope that they're going to do less damage to your life. We should all move to Kazakhstan. Lots of gold there. And Carl says you might start buying silver again after it drops $10. People get caught up on the price. Gullible Travels. Illuminati Silver says there's 20 years oversupply of silver. That is all I need to know. That's possible. I mean, the idea that they keep saying that there's a silver shortage, and I haven't heard of anyone having any trouble getting any silver anywhere. Roger Henley, the last time I bought silver was more or less the same price it is today, thanks to my local currency dropping 13% this year. You're an Aussie, that's right. Just buy gold, he says. Oh, we got more comments than I thought I had here. Carl Joseph DeMarco, isn't there a regional, cultural, geographic aspect to this that is also valued? I.e., if silver is valued here, maybe it makes good apocalypse money. Yes, yes. But what's the premium on that insurance for the apocalypse? How likely is the apocalypse? And what price are people willing to pay to have barter silver? That's a good point. Now, if you're selling, if you look at Silver Shield, whatever they're called, Silver Bullet, Silver Shield, you probably could barter with them, but the idea that, you got a picture of some, I don't know, there's some interesting designs on those, they're probably going to be less accepted than maybe silver dimes or quarters or just a generic looking round that says 1 ounce. And if you've got a collector's item, it's probably harder to barter with. But those coins, though, I believe, they're not that highly priced. So if you can prove that it's an ounce of silver, you could probably get the ounce of silver. But those coins are more valuable in a non-apocalypse, I would imagine, because people don't collect anything in an apocalypse. But today, there are people who collect silver rounds, and they're willing to pay far more than the face, not the face value, but the metal content on things like the Silver Bullet, Silver Shield. But if you're looking for real appreciation in the price of silver, it's either going to have to be because there's great demand for industry, or, as you say, there's a demand for monetary, because people say, well, that's what they're going to need if the lights go out permanently. But you see, the reason the price isn't that high is if you were to take betting odds, the world isn't betting that the lights are going to go out for a long time, or we're going to end up in the Stone Age, and it's going to be Mad Max. And in fact, if you actually thought there was going to be Mad Max, I don't think you'd want silver anyway. I think you'd want supplies, ammunition, and things like that far more than you'd want a pile of junk silver lying around. So I think that's why the price doesn't reflect any monetary or any apocalypse premium right now. All right. Bix Weir says there are 20 million ounces of hidden silver or some such, and yet he says the price will go high. How's that work? Well, 20 million ounces isn't that much silver, Carl. I mean, they make 800, 900 million ounces of silver a year. We saw the other night, I identified 1.4 billion ounces of silver in different stockpiles around the world. The COMEX stockpiles, the Shanghai Gold Exchange stockpiles, the LBMA stockpiles, the ETF stockpiles. So if he says there's 20 million ounces hidden somewhere, well, somebody just got a nice pile of silver. Not that big of a deal. What about platinum? Any views? Yeah, platinum is a strange one because palladium has been the big winner. If you've just been stacking palladium for the last 10 years, you made a lot of money. Platinum was considered a cheap substitute for palladium was considered a cheap substitute for platinum, and platinum used to be considered the premier metal over gold. And now palladium is priced at $1,100 almost, and platinum at $850, $860, and platinum is cheaper than gold. So a lot of that has to do with neither of them. Palladium has zero monetary value. Platinum only had monetary value in Russia in the late 19th century when they first found it and they minted a few coins. Those are industrial metals, and they are platinum is actually a jewelry metal, but palladium is not. Palladium, I guess, just has a significant industrial demand for cars, cattle, and they're using palladium. But if palladium stays at this price, I guess you could see them switching back over to platinum. Did you know that platinum is the most dense element on the planet? So you cannot counterfeit platinum if somebody has a density machine, because there isn't anything like it. Now, the reason they use tungsten to counterfeit gold is very close in density. But you cannot, and you can therefore get a tungsten bar, it's worthless, and then plate it with gold, and the density will appear close enough. But palladium and silver are far less dense, and I just don't know why they're not using platinum if palladium's gotten so expensive. Yep, we talked about palladium. Yeah. Kazakhstan is going to be the game changer. Yes, central banks are buying gold. That is all I need to know. All right. Let's see. So Carl Joseph DeMarco left a message, and I guess YouTube wants me to review it before I can show it. Now, there's no swear words in it, and there's no, well, he has the word KILL in it, and I don't know if that's the, whether that would be a reason not to have the comment show, but I'm not going to show it. All right. To me, it's not that big of a deal. All right, let's see. Gullible's Travel. Palladium has already increased in price a lot, but Platinum's at a 60% discount from highs. That is all I need to know. You know, you look at that and you say, what's the problem? But then you could say, one thing I do know about, I did a study on Platinum a couple of years ago. It's out of date. But one of the things I learned about Platinum is the Japanese used to go bonkers for it as a jewelry. They thought that was the best. And then they kind of went off it. So you lost that jewelry demand. Chinese don't really like it very much as jewelry. It doesn't have the same allure. And then if it's lost its industrial amount, even though it's rare, but it's one of those things, though, because it's such a small market, all it would take would be a shift into it or a new demand. They only make it, really, only mine it in South Africa and Russia and a little bit in the United States. So that is something that is a potential spike, but who knows when or if that would happen. Mark Snyder, how accurate do you think the numbers from the Silver Institute are? I think they're directionally accurate. I don't think that I wouldn't vouch for them, but I doubt they're off by a factor of 3, 5, 10 times on their silver demand or on their gold demand. I mean, I know a lot of people want to believe, oh, no. Chinese, they buy silver hand over fist. That's all I need to know. Silver, if China really was buying silver hand over fist, then maybe you would have some demand for silver that couldn't be met. But I don't think so, because we also see China exports a lot. So you see it in the numbers. I didn't show you those tonight. But if you look at Chinese export numbers for gold, it doesn't exist. They don't export any gold. So when they show you numbers that say how much gold has been imported into China, how much they produced, how much the Shanghai Gold Exchange trades, how much the World Gold Council says they're buying, they're directionally correct. I wouldn't vouch for them within 20-30%. But the numbers on silver, again, they could be off by 20-30%. All right, so instead of they bought 10 million ounces of silver last year, they bought 12 million. They're not going to be off by factors of 10 or 20. But that's a good point. I don't think that you really can't know what the numbers are. But there's no indication, and anecdotal either, from people that have lived in China, told me that people are running around buying silver. Maybe Carl might want to make a comment on that. I think he made one earlier. He says they don't buy silver. Now, again, that's anecdotal, but sometimes you can tie in numbers with anecdotal, and you could say, okay, well, that matches. There's no anomaly there. Silver will have its day, will be still alive. Yes, silver has had its day like every 30, 40 years. I've made this one. I've showed you the charts. It does have a spike and dive characteristic. The next one, if it's every 30 or so years, is not due to 2041. Could happen before then. May never happen again. Who knows? But silver has a history of spiking and diving. Dr. Medesco says Silver Institute's numbers should be good because they work for consumers as well as producers, so they're like bookies. They don't care who wins or loses. Yeah, I don't think that they try to fudge the numbers. I think they try to get the best number they can. In fact, I know that a few years back, I sent them a note, 2015, and they had shown that the privately minted silver rounds and bars only went up like very small amount from the year before, when they had the official sovereign mint numbers pretty much as I had calculated them, because all they do is, well, guess what I do is I went around to all the official mints and I got their numbers. Some of them I had a right to them and get them, and then we both had pretty close numbers, but they had very, very low numbers for privately minted numbers, even though the sovereigns had gone up. And I wrote to them and I said, your numbers are way too low. I know they were an estimate. I said, but if the sovereigns are up so high, I know that the privately minted ones are up a lot, because in 2015, the Canadian Mint and the U.S. Mint ran out of silver planchets. And I know that at the time that led a lot of people to have to buy generic rounds in silver, and they adjusted their number higher. So, yeah, I don't think they didn't put in that number low for any reason. That's just how they calculated their number, and they had no incentive to change it higher other than realizing that I was probably directionally more correct in my estimate than they were, and then they just changed their number. And they'll do that. I mean, I don't think there's anything in that organization that wants to mislead, but they also, without intentionally trying to mislead, they could be 100% wrong on something, just like I could be when I'm estimating. Or you can get the number from the source, but the source itself has an interest in misleading you. Some people think the U.S. Mint makes up the numbers. I don't think so, but let's say they do. And I report on them, and I say the U.S. Mint sold 50 million ounces of silver, so says the U.S. Mint. Then you find out they sold 5 million ounces. Someone just said that they will. So that's always a possibility, too. All right. AI is buying options derivatives and Smaulgld mugs. That's what you really should do. I've been shipping out a lot of mugs lately, so if you want to get your mugs, they're game changers. I've been putting in the game changer erasers lately, so check them out. I am stacking whiskey bottles just in case. That's a good idea. Dr. Minesco Willivage, I don't vote, it only encourages them. I think they're talking about gold in the Grand Canyon. Yes, I think that's what Bix is talking about. Osium is denser than platinum. If I remember my high school, I'm going off of, what do you call it? I think platinum was 23.1. Osium, let's see. Osium density. And our survey says, nope, slightly less dense than platinum. Osium is 22 point, unless I'm wrong with my number. The density is it's twice the density of lead and slightly denser than iridium, but I believe the density is 22.59 on Osium, and from my memory, platinum density was, I think, 23 point, let's see. Nope, you're right. Platinum is 21.45, so it is Osium. Another winner there. So you're absolutely correct. It is more dense than platinum. But is Osium something that you can make into a coin? Well, anyway, thank you very much for that one. High school chemistry. Carl Joseph DeMarco. I went to a lot of precious metals dealers in China and was hard-pressed to buy silver when I found that it was a minimum 2 times spot. Hong Kong is more Western and has a Kitco. Okay. Gold, on the other hand, was available everywhere in China, says Carl Joseph DeMarco. Even local banks sold gold bars and commemoratives and even have gold-backed bank savings account. Yes. So there you go. I mean, the silver culture is an American one. And remember, there's an American forget the internet stuff, but there was the Silver Democrats. They were always pushing for silver. Pittman was the Harry Reid of Nevada at the time, Senator Pittman. The Pittman Act. They're always pushing silver to be a bimetallic standard going back to the early 1800s and trying to get silver into the monetary system. It was inflationary metal. It was actually JFK and then finally Lyndon Johnson who broke the Democrats' tie to silver by taking the silver out of the coinage, and then also Kennedy actually instructed them not to back the silver pile by silver certificates, and they finally got rid of silver certificates in 1968. If Venezuela is a good-sized gold importer, I read today they repatriate the gold for Great Britain, $550 million. Why not keep the gold? Well, they also had to spend a lot of it, Pablo, when they still need to spend it. They've lost a lot of their gold just having to pay off their debts. And they sent a lot of it when they mine it, they send it to Turkey for refining. And now there's this whole executive order trying to stop the gold trade in Venezuela. If you were standing on a corner right now, says Mint Mark, with 4 silver pre-64 quarters, how long would it take you to get someone under the age of 50 to give you $2 for them? I'm guessing a long time. I don't think that would be a Mark Dice thing. If you told them that you had $1 worth of quarters, which I suppose are worth what, $12, $10, something like that in the silver price. You see, the problem with the silver as a barter metal is like a quarter has like 0.36. It doesn't have a quarter ounce of silver in it. It has what does it have? dime has 0.0176. And the quarter, I think the quarter has less than 20. The numbers are not round at all. But in any event, I think that you need like $1.25 to get an ounce of silver. Yeah, so an ounce of pre-1965 silver is probably worth $10-12. No one's going to give you $2 for it. They'll say, I'll give you $1 for it if they even want it. That's because they don't know. Platinum, there you go. You got the same number, 2145, and then osmium is slightly more. Survey says your Richard Dawson impression is not as good as your Bernie Sanders. I don't even know how Richard Dawson sounds. I wasn't even trying to imitate him. I just remember The Price is Right. But Bernie Sanders,
that's the 1% in this country. They got all the constitutional silver.
All right. Of course, the Nevada senator pushed silver. Probably interested in mines. Absolutely. You know who else was a sleazy senator? It was the guy in The Godfather. Remember him? He was from Nevada. Out in, I don't like your kind out here. I intend to squeeze you. And that's when Pacino says to him, I'll give you my answer now, Senator. Nothing. And he's like, all right, you play your little games. And then they hooked him up and they made it look like he killed the prostitute. And that was the end of Senator Geary as a trying to squeeze the mafia. Osmium is used for fountain pen tips. Well, those are in big demand today. I'm standing on the corner in Winslow, Arizona with a fine sight to see. Now we're talking about the Eagles. Already gone. All right. You merely mentioned, Esper Hunter, you merely mentioned silver and people's eyes glaze over and their brains turn off. Yeah. What it comes down to is the people that watch these channels, they get so into gold or silver, they get derangement syndrome. They sit there and they're like, yes, let me watch this one. Oh, let me move to the other channel. Silver is rarer than gold. Silver is going higher. Silver is the most valuable thing in our lives. All crypto's going to zero. And it just gets in their head and they become like NPCs about silver or gold. And then they could just repeat the stuff as a mantra. And I don't know anything else. That is all I need to know. Measure my wealth in ounces. No, measure your wealth in mugs. Period. Survey says, I wish I could find me some tantalum at a decent price. Yeah. Tantalum is set to skyrocket. All right, everyone. I want to thank you for joining me. And we'll be back tomorrow. Well, tomorrow night, we're going to have these election results, which will be interesting. So we'll see you tomorrow night. Thanks again for listening. Silver is rarer than gold. That is all I need to